The history of World War II is filled with accounts of daring operations and pivotal battles, but few possess the dramatic scope and controversial legacy of Operation Market Garden, launched in the autumn of 1944. This immense undertaking, combining the power of the 1st Allied Airborne Army with the might of the British 2nd Army, was designed to seize crucial crossings over canals and rivers in the Netherlands. The ultimate goal was to outflank the formidable German West Wall and position the Allies for a decisive thrust into the heart of industrial Germany, specifically toward the Ruhr region. While the subsequent fighting at the northernmost objective, Arnhem, has been widely chronicled and fixed in the public imagination, the equally intense, vital, and far more geographically expansive struggle fought by the 2 American Airborne Divisions further south often fades from memory. Shortly after the operation concluded, United States Air Force Lieutenant General Lewis H. Brereton, who commanded the 1st Allied Airborne Army, offered a somber prediction. In the years to come, everyone will remember Arnhem, but no one will remember that 2 American divisions fought their hearts out in the Dutch Canal country. This assessment proved sadly accurate, as the actions of the 2 American divisions involved, the veteran United States 101st Airborne Division and the 82nd Airborne Division, have received comparatively little attention in historical narratives. The critical contribution of these American troops, who secured the lengthy and fragile supply corridor that became known as Hell's Highway, was essential to the entire operation's initial progress. Their mission was vast and complex, far exceeding the scope of the objectives given to the British and Polish airborne forces. Analyzing their performance, the outstanding leadership they exhibited, and the intense resistance they overcame, reveals a forgotten chapter of courage and military competence that was fundamental to the success achieved in the central and southern sectors of the operation. Understanding Market Garden requires moving beyond the singular tragic focus on Arnhem to appreciate the full, demanding scope of the air-ground assault and the immense sacrifices made by all involved, particularly the American paratroopers in the face of rapidly improvised but highly effective German opposition. The context of strategic necessity and risk. By the beginning of September 1944, the rapid Allied advance across Western Europe had encountered a significant obstacle: logistics. The supply lines were stretched to the breaking point. The British supply lines extended 500 kilometers all the way back to Bayeux, and the American lines were even longer, running 600 kilometers through Paris to the Cotentin Peninsula. General George Patton is famously alleged to have highlighted the severe constraint by stating, "My men can eat their belts, but my tanks have got to have gas." No major port east of the Seine River had been captured, exacerbating the logistical bottleneck. This supply crisis fueled a serious strategic debate among Allied commanders regarding the future course of the campaign. General Omar Bradley's 12th Army Group advocated for a broad front approach, moving south toward the Saar. Conversely, Field Marshal Bernard Law Montgomery's 21st Army Group favored a single, concentrated thrust in the north toward the Ruhr industrial region. On September 4, 1944, Supreme Allied Commander Dwight Eisenhower issued a directive that partially resolved this tension, ordering Montgomery's Army Group and elements of the 1st United States Army to reach the sector of the Rhine, covering the Ruhr, and then seize the Ruhr. Despite this apparent green light for Montgomery's northern thrust, his 21st Army Group actually lacked sufficient forces ready for immediate exploitation of German weaknesses. Out of 14 divisions and 7 armored brigades, only 2 armored divisions of the British 30th Corps were prepared to continue the offensive. Other crucial units were tied up. 6 Canadian divisions were clearing essential ports like Le Havre. The British 12th Corps was pushing the German 15th Army toward the Scheldt estuary, and the British 8th Corps was immobilized near the Seine due to a lack of transport. Nevertheless, the 30th Corps pressed on, capturing the critical port of Antwerp on September 4th. By September 10th, an armored group had secured a foothold across the Albert Canal at Neerpelt, providing Montgomery the required launching point for his single-thrust plan. That same afternoon, Montgomery secured approval from Eisenhower for the operation. The approved plan relied heavily upon the 1st Allied Airborne Army, which represented Eisenhower's sole strategic reserve. This army was tasked with securing the river crossings, allowing British armor to advance rapidly, outflanking the West Wall and potentially cutting off all German forces in Western Holland, including the sizable 15th Army. Montgomery gave the immediate order for Operation Market Garden to commence on September 17th. The 1st Allied Airborne Army was commanded by General Brereton, with British Lieutenant General Boy Browning serving as his deputy. The force was organized into 2 corps, the British 1st Corps and the American 18th United States Airborne Corps. The 18th Corps representing the battle-hardened 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions. The British Corps, commanded by General Browning, comprised the 1st British Airborne Division, which had no prior experience, and the same was true for the 1st Polish Independent Parachute Brigade Group.
These airborne soldiers were described as being like coins burning in Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Forces pocket, having been held on standby for numerous operations since early July that were never launched, often because ground troops advanced too quickly or aircraft were diverted for aerial resupply missions. There was, therefore, palpable relief and enthusiasm among the planners when the operation was greenlit, envisioning the deployment of 3 1/3 Airborne Divisions, with the ground troops of the British 30th Corps expected to relieve them within 3 days. The blueprint and its fatal flaws. The core mission of Operation Martin Garden was clear: capture and hold 5 major crossings over the canals and waterways lying along the British Second Army's advance axis between the Dutch towns of Eindhoven and Arnhem. The command structure of the operation was immediately fraught with issues. Command was vested in Lieutenant General Browning, the British Deputy Commander of the 1st Airborne Army. This decision was surprising for 3 reasons. First, 75% of the troops participating were American. Second, the United States Corps Commander, Ridgway, possessed far greater experience. And third, Browning's headquarters was primarily designed for planning, administrative, and training functions, not combat command. Predictably, Browning's headquarters lacked the means to communicate effectively with the 2 American divisions, necessitating last-minute additions of American manpower and equipment. Due to these totally inadequate communications, Browning and his headquarters ultimately played a minimal role in the ensuing battle. This poor planning also resulted in 38 gliders being wasted, gliders that the British 1st Airborne Division desperately needed for its first lift. The basic operational plan allocated objectives according to geography and scale. The 101st Airborne Division was tasked with seizing several bridges and defiles between Eindhoven and Grave. The 82nd Airborne Division had a highly complex and demanding mission: capture the Maas River crossing at Grave, secure at least one of the 4 bridges over the Maas-Waal Canal, occupy the strategic high ground between Nijmegen and Grolsbeek, and finally capture the vast Waal Road Bridge in Nijmegen. The British 1st Airborne Division, supported later by the Polish Brigade Group, was assigned to capture the bridges over the Lower Rhine at Arnhem and establish sufficient bridgeheads for the passage of the 30th Corps. A clear disparity in mission scope was evident. The assignments given to the American divisions were infinitely greater in extent than those assigned to the British and Poles. While the British and Polish troops had to hold their limited operational area for a longer duration, the sheer magnitude and complexity of the American operational areas virtually guaranteed extreme difficulty in holding them until relief arrived. To address this challenge, the American divisions were reinforced with an extra regiment each, increasing their strength from 3 to 4 regiments. The success of the ground component, the 30th Corps, was hinged entirely on speed of advance. Their operation instruction prophetically stated that success depended largely on speed of advance. Yet, the inherent dangers were obvious. Sending a complete corps comprising over 20,000 vehicles down a narrow corridor with only one proper road across a series of 6 major canals and waterways to link up with an airborne bridgehead 100 kilometers away presented immense risks. Beyond the logistical and command issues, Operation Martin Garden faced 3 well-known inherent risks. First, the risk of bad weather, particularly in the autumn. Second, there was insufficient number of aircraft and gliders to carry out all the necessary landings in a single lift. Third, the entire assault had to be carried out in daylight. United States Major General Paul L. Williams, the air commander, supported by General Brereton, decided that no more than 1 lift could be flown each day. This decision was made because navigating and keeping formation in the pre-dawn or post-dusk hours would have been extremely difficult, and crucially, there was insufficient ground staff available to turn around and repair aircraft swiftly enough for 2 lifts in one day. Consequently, the plan required 3 consecutive days of good flying weather to ensure the entire force could be landed, adding a major vulnerability to the timeline. The resilience of German improvisation. The Germans were far from being a spent force, and their reaction to the rapidly changing situation demonstrated an incredible feat of improvisation and organization. Just 2 weeks before the assault, on September 4th, General Kurt Student, the head of the German parachute arm, was telephoned and told he was to command a new formation, the 1st Parachute Army. His immediate mission was to build a defensive front along the Albert Canal in northern Belgium.
The context of his mission was dire. The German 15th Army, over 80,000 men strong, was isolated in northeast Belgium and could only escape across the Scheldt estuary, a process expected to take at least 3 weeks with heavy losses. Furthermore, the remnants of the 7th Army were being pushed rapidly toward the Ardennes forest, leaving a vast 120-kilometer gap along the Albert Canal. The only troops available to fill this immense gap were the depleted remnants of a division badly mauled in Normandy and a fortress division guarding the Dutch coastline. General Student's mandate was to assemble a fighting force from whatever was available. This included all garrison, training, and administrative troops already in Holland. A division of convalescents and men previously invalided out of the army was also in training at Aachen and expected to arrive shortly. Most surprisingly, Luftwaffe Chief Hermann Göring volunteered 30,000 Luftwaffe personnel, consisting of 6 parachute regiments in various stages of training and 10,000 air and ground crew whose normal operations were curtailed by fuel shortages. Through sheer organizational genius, General Student established a defensive line, however fragile, by September 13th. This line stretched from the mouth of the Scheldt to Maastricht and comprised a mere 32 ad hoc battalions, backed by 25 assault guns. Crucially, while this hasty defense was being constructed, the last elements of Willy Bittrick's 2nd SS Panzer Corps arrived in central Holland. This corps, which had suffered heavy losses in Normandy, was sent to Holland specifically to refit and lick its wounds. The corps consisted of 2 divisions, the 9th SS Panzer Hohenstaufen and the 10th SS Panzer Frundsberg, though they were severely under strength, numbering only 6,000 to 7,000 men each, with only about half being combat troops. Nevertheless, their presence near the proposed Allied landing zones was a coincidence of immense operational significance. The Hohenstaufen Division was destined for heavy involvement in the Arnhem battle, while the Frundsberg Division would play a critical role in the fight for Nijmegen. Elements of these divisions were already being moved. 2 Hohenstaufen Panzer Grenadier battalions and 3 batteries of artillery were transferred to the Frundsberg Division. Furthermore, the Frundsberg commander, SS Captain Heinz Harmel, formed a strong battle group reserve for the 1st Parachute Army, known as Battle Group Heinzke. This group included 2 SS Panzer Grenadier battalions, reconnaissance and pioneer companies, an artillery battalion, and was reinforced by a Panzerjäger battalion equipped with 21 Jagdpanzer IVs. Battle Group Heinzke was deployed south of Eindhoven, ready to counter the American 101st Airborne Division. The airborne assault commences. Operation Martin Garden began overnight on September 16th through 17th with extensive air operations. 200 Royal Air Force Lancaster heavy bombers and 23 Mosquito fighter bombers attacked 4 airfields near the drop zones. At dawn, more Lancasters and Mosquitoes attacked known anti-aircraft positions. Crucially, just before the troop-carrying aircraft arrived, 816 United States B-17 heavy bombers, escorted by hundreds of Mustang and Thunderbolt fighters, attacked 117 additional known anti-aircraft positions along the approaches to the landing zones. The airborne armada itself was immense, consisting of 1,544 troop-carrying aircraft and 478 gliders, all protected by 919 fighter aircraft. The launch began at 10:25 hours, taking 1.5 hours, with aircraft lifting off from 17 United States and 9 British bases in England. Reports of hundreds of Allied aircraft flying northeast quickly reached German headquarters, but few duty officers immediately appreciated the significance of the massive formation flying on that warm, sunny afternoon. One senior officer who did grasp the danger was SS Major General Bittrick, commander of the 2nd SS Panzer Corps. Receiving his first enemy situation report at 13:30 hours German time, he issued immediate warning orders to both the Hohenstaufen and the Frundsberg divisions within 10 minutes. The Hohenstaufen was ordered to secure Arnhem and its bridges, engaging enemy air landings to the west. The Frundsberg was directed toward Nijmegen to occupy the Waal River bridges and then advance south of the city. The 101st Airborne secures Hell's Highway. The 101st Airborne Division, commanded by Major General Maxwell Taylor, largely succeeded in its extensive mission to secure the bridges along the 25-kilometer corridor between Eindhoven and Veghel. Within a few hours, nearly 7,000 paratroopers had captured the towns of Veghel and St. Odenrode, seizing all but one of the necessary bridges.
This corridor quickly became infamous to the Americans as Hell's Highway.
The turning point of the operation came at the bridge in the town of Son, also known as Zahn, which crossed the Wilhelmina Canal. A German defensive unit from the Hermann Göring Training Regiment managed to delay Colonel Robert Sink's 506 Parachute Infantry Regiment long enough for the bridge to be destroyed around 4 p.m. Despite this obstacle, the American troops quickly adapted. Overnight, they crossed the canal using small boats and improvised methods, successfully pushing through the German resistance. By dawn, engineers had assembled a temporary wooden footbridge, allowing the 506th Regiment to continue their advance toward Eindhoven, where they planned to join the approaching British armored units. Meanwhile, German forces under Field Marshal Model organized a swift counteraction against General Student's 1st Parachute Army. 3 units were mobilized with the goal of disrupting the Allied foothold. Elements of the 59th Infantry Division were ordered toward the best sector of the Wilhelmina Canal, while 2 improvised battalions of paratroopers moved toward the American bridgeheads at St. Udenrode and Veghel. The most formidable threat, however, came from Panzer Brigade 107, which included armored vehicles and tanks redeployed from the Aachen region, expected to arrive within a day. The 59th Division's push near Best successfully prevented Allied forces from capturing another canal bridge on September 17th, underlining the determined nature of the German defense. The 82nd Airborne and the challenge at Nijmegen. Farther north, Brigadier General James Gavin led the 82nd Airborne Division in a successful landing of over 7,200 paratroopers and 48 gliders. The 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment quickly captured the key bridge over the Maas River at Grave and secured another bridge across the Maaswal Canal by nightfall. These early achievements meant that, once British armored forces linked up, the route toward Nijmegen would be open. At the same time, the 505th and 508th Parachute Infantry Regiments, along with artillery and engineer support, occupied the crucial Groesbeck Heights, a high ground position protecting the approaches from Germany. Given the size of the operational zone, many American defensive points consisted of only small, platoon-sized groups holding strategic crossroads. General Gavin's orders prioritized securing the bridges over the Maas and Maaswal Canal, as well as maintaining control of Groesbeck. The Nijmegen Bridge was a secondary target and was to be approached only if the situation was fully under control and ideally under the cover of night.
By 1800 hours on the 17th, the situation appeared favorable enough for an attempt. At 2200 hours, the move toward the bridge began, committing 3 companies from 2 separate battalions. This attempt quickly ran into heavy opposition near the main traffic island in Nijmegen, halting the advance of the 508th Parachute Infantry Regiment. The defense of the Nijmegen Road Bridge was managed by a quickly assembled scratch force of about 750 men from various training and reserve units, cobbled together by a Colonel Henke. This demonstrated clear German initiative and military competence. Henke ensured that 29 88mm anti-aircraft guns, along with smaller 20mm weapons, which were already sighted to protect the bridges from air attack, were capable of firing in a critical ground support role. The limited resources deployed by the Americans for this vital objective, just 3 companies, reflected the sheer magnitude of their commitments across the vast area. The failure to seize the bridge intact on day 1, however, allowed the Germans crucial time to reinforce. The slow road north and the bridge defense. The British ground advance began with the 30th Corps. Despite massive artillery support and close air cover, the leading brigades were ordered to halt at Valkenswaard at 2200 hours on the 17th, after an advance of only 12 kilometers. The official reason given was that the armored group, quote, had been fighting hard and tanks require maintenance, unquote. Incredibly, the advance did not resume until 700 hours the following morning. A guards officer later expressed shock, writing that they should never have stayed the night in Valkenswaard, but should have continued non-stop to Eindhoven, arguing that stopping made no sense given the distance remaining to Arnhem and the crossings ahead. Meanwhile, the German defenses at Nijmegen were being strengthened rapidly. The first reinforcements to contact the existing bridge defense, Battle Group Henke, were elements of Major Reinhold's Frundsberg SS Panzergrenadier Battalion. Pioneers immediately began preparing the massive road and railway bridges for demolition.
The next critical arrival was Captain Euling's Hohenstaufen SS Panzergrenadier Battalion, attached to the Frundsberg. Euling ordered Euling's men to secure the immediate approaches to the road bridge.
Oiling established his command post near the Volkov citadel and positioned his troops to cover all approaches to the large traffic island near the south end of the bridge. This was the same traffic island where the 508th had been halted the previous evening. 4 armored assault guns were allocated to Oiling, ferried across the Rhine by Frundsberg pioneers. On the north bank, Reinhold repositioned the 88mm anti-aircraft guns among the houses near the water's edge, enabling them to engage any approaching vehicles with direct fire. As more Frundsberg units arrived, including a few Mark III and Mark IV tanks, the defenses were strengthened with mines and obstacles, including the demolition of factory chimneys and church towers. On the American side, Brigadier General Gavin faced immense pressure. Until his second lift arrived, he knew he lacked the necessary strength to both hold the vital Groesbeek area and simultaneously mount a strong attack on the Nijmegen Road Bridge. His problem was compounded by the fact that the previous night's abortive attempt on the bridge had depleted his forces covering the landing zones and the approaches from the Reichswald. At 6:30 hours on the morning of September 18th, the Germans launched their long-awaited counterattack. In another stunning display of inventiveness and competence, they assembled an ad hoc force designated the 406th Division. This group, totaling over 3,000 men, many of whom had never received even basic infantry training, was armed with 24 mortars, 130 light and medium machine guns, 3 artillery batteries, and a few armored cars. Their orders were simple: attack and drive the Americans back across the Maas River. Given the extremely thin American defenses, the German attacks made progress, overrunning parts of the landing zones. With the expected daylight fly-in delayed until 1300 hours due to bad weather in England, General Gavin was forced to withdraw men from Nijmegen and commit his last reserves, 2 companies of the 307th Parachute Engineer Battalion. Fighting continued even as the first of 450 Dakotas, towing 450 gliders, appeared overhead at 1400 hours. Though some casualties occurred, the fly-in, which delivered 18 howitzers and 8 57mm anti-tank guns, was highly successful and caused panic among the attacking Germans, who fled. Although the American forces suffered few casualties during this specific action, the German counterattack and the late arrival of reinforcements ended Gavin's opportunity to mount a proper, full-scale attack against the Nijmegen bridges that day. His remaining hope rested on a combined attack with the British armor, which he was told would arrive at the Grave Bridge the following morning. Junction and frustration. The British 5th Guards Armored Brigade resumed its advance at 700 hours on September 18th. The advance was slow. It took until midday for the leading battle group to cover the 5 kilometers to Aalst, facing only minor opposition. North of Aalst, the column encountered 4 88mm guns covering a waterway and the approach to Eindhoven. While armored cars managed to bypass this opposition, the weakness of local bridges frustrated the advance of the heavier tanks. It took a further 6 hours before the leading elements reached Eindhoven and made contact with the United States 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment. Eindhoven itself was undefended, presenting an almost peacetime atmosphere. American soldiers were already strolling around, and a young British Guards officer noted the surprising lack of static defenses. The British tanks reached the blown Wilhelmina Canal Bridge at Son at 2100 hours. Royal Engineers immediately began bridging the gap, and despite a heavy German bombing attack on Eindhoven during the night, a 40-ton Bailey Bridge was completed by 6:15 hours on September 19th. Meanwhile, back at Best, the struggle for the Wilhelmina Canal Bridge had reached a climax. Elements of the 59th Division proved too strong for Lieutenant Colonel John Michaelis's 502nd Regiment, and the bridge was successfully blown at midday on the 18th. This continuing buildup of the 59th Division posed a serious threat to the 101st Airborne Division's tenuous hold on Hell's Highway. The weather in England continued to impact the flow of crucial reinforcements. On September 19th, the 9th Troop Carrier Command launched 445 aircraft and 385 gliders. However, 27 aircraft were lost, and only 221 gliders reached their landing zones. The failure to launch 258 gliders carrying the 82nd Airborne Division's 325th Glider Infantry Regiment ended any hope General Gavin had of capturing the Nijmegen bridges that day. Compounding the logistical challenge, only 40 of the 265 tons of essential stores and ammunition destined for the 82nd Division were recovered. The British advance from Son began at 6:15 hours on the 19th, reaching the Grave Bridge at 1100 hours. There, the commander of the 30th Corps was met by Lieutenant General Browning and Brigadier General Gavin. Recognizing the urgency, Browning suggested that a concerted rush might succeed in capturing the Nijmegen road bridge. Following a short conference, Gavin placed the 2nd Battalion of the 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment under British command for the rush mission, receiving in return a mixed British battle group of tanks and infantry to help defend his 40-kilometer perimeter facing the Reichswald. Gavin later noted that with the availability of British armor, the Americans felt equal to anything that could happen.
The combined advance into Nijmegen, employing 3 columns, commenced at 1600 hours. A small group, aiming for the post office, believing it housed the demolition control point, captured it easily but found nothing. Stronger, simultaneous attacks were launched against Battle Group Euling, defending the road bridge, and Battle Group Henke, defending the rail bridge. The attack on the road bridge was conducted by the 2nd Battalion of the 505th, reinforced with 12 British tanks and a British infantry company. Neither assault succeeded. A German historian described the intense defense. Heavy fire burst from all the houses and parks around the 2 bridges over the wall against the attackers. Several British Sherman tanks were knocked out by an 88mm gun near the railway bridge. At the highway bridge, the attackers were prevented from closing in, as 20mm anti-aircraft fire hammered the streets, and 2 armored assault guns struck from concealed ambush positions, destroying several enemy tanks. As darkness fell, the infantry attack was repulsed, and American paratroopers and British tanks settled into defensive positions 400 meters from the bridges. A British liaison officer with the Americans confirmed the intense resistance, noting that the plan to rush the bridge failed because German SS troops and others held both ends in strength. He praised the American troops, calling them splendid types, brave and cheerful, and seemingly indifferent to the worst. The attack halted at a roundabout just short of the bridge. Facing a crisis, the Allied commanders met late in the day. Field Marshal Model, the overall German commander, had expressly forbidden the demolition of the road bridge, determined to use it for a counteroffensive. However, the Allied commanders were acutely aware that with Germans holding both banks, the risk of demolition, should the Germans be pushed further, was immense. The British force at Arnhem was in deep trouble. The 82nd Airborne Division's eastern perimeter was under heavy pressure, and the extremely narrow 30th Corps corridor was constantly threatened. While normal circumstances might suggest a river crossing operation further up or down the river, the time required for such complex actions would have guaranteed the annihilation of the British at Arnhem. The gallant crossing of the Wall. Faced with this impossible choice, General Gavin conceived a daring and extremely risky plan: attack both ends of the bridge at once. He recognized that continuing to simply pour infantry and British armor into the costly battle at the southern end would result in days of fighting, spelling the doom of the British paratroopers at Arnhem. This decisive action came on September 20th, a day General Gavin described as unprecedented in the division's combat history, noting that each of the 3 regiments fought and won a critical battle against heavy odds. While the 505th and 508th fought desperately southeast of Nijmegen to hold off German forces attacking from the Reichswald, the 3rd Regiment prepared for the final, decisive assault on the Waal River bridges. General Browning, witnessing the climax of the battle, was reportedly moved to exclaim, "I have never seen a more gallant action." The German attacks from the Reichswald had begun around 800 hours and made considerable progress against the badly overstretched Americans, capturing several villages and threatening the only bridge available to the 30th Corps over the Mosswall Canal. The 82nd Division suffered heavy casualties, including 150 killed and 600 wounded by this time. This critical situation was only restored later that night and the following morning by strong American counterattacks, supported by elements of the attached British armored group. Gavin's high-risk plan involved joint American and British attacks to secure the southern ends of the bridges, while most of the 504th Paratroop Infantry Regiment would cross the Waal River in assault boats to the west of the railway bridge to secure the northern bank. Critically, British tanks were to make a dash across the road bridge immediately upon its capture. It took 5 hours, until 1330 hours, simply to clear the jumping-off area for the final assault and the river crossing point. Further delays were caused in bringing up 32 British assault boats from the 30th Corps column, primarily due to another extremely heavy German air raid on Eindhoven the previous night, which had blocked roads and caused civilian casualties. Just before 1500 hours, following an airstrike by 8 British Typhoons and a 15-minute artillery barrage, the assault began. The boats, each carrying 13 paratroopers and manned by men of C Company of the 307th Airborne Engineer Battalion, set off across the 400-meter-wide river.
Major Julian Cook's 3rd Battalion of the 504th led the attack, followed by Lieutenant Colonel William Harrison's 1st Battalion in 6 waves. Direct fire support came from the South Bank, provided by Major Edward Willem's 2nd Battalion and 30 British tanks near the power station, complemented by 100 American guns and mortars providing indirect fire. Smoke rounds were fired for cover, but much of the smoke blew away before it could become fully effective. The river crossing was an act of incredible gallantry, famously depicted in historical accounts. Under murderous fire, the men of the 504th persevered, securing the north bank of the Waal.
Meanwhile, the complementary assault against Battle Group Uling at the southern end of the road bridge reached its climax. Despite numerous casualties and the loss of a Sherman tank, the combined force of Lieutenant Colonel Ben Vandervoort's 2nd Battalion and Lieutenant Colonel Edward Goldburn's 1st Grenadier Guards, supported by Shermans, finally overwhelmed the German defenders. German resistance seemed to crack. A patrol from the Grenadier Guards reached the bridge and found it clear, apart from shell-shocked Germans. However, when a troop of 4 Grenadier Guards tanks attempted to move across at 1830 hours, it was still too light, and they were met by strong anti-tank fire, forcing them to withdraw. By this time, the valiant men of the 504th, having suffered 134 casualties, killed, wounded, or missing, had secured the north end of the railway bridge and continued their advance. The stagnation and the bitter aftermath. At 1900 hours, as the 504th Paratroopers approached the northern end of the massive road bridge, the troop of 4 Grenadier Guards Shermans was ordered to advance again. Despite the rapidly fading light, they came under fire from 2 88mm guns on the far side, an armored assault gun firing straight down the bridge, and men on the structure using handheld anti-tank weapons and machine guns. Although the 2 rear tanks were hit, the other 2 succeeded in crossing. They knocked out the armored assault gun and linked up with Lieutenant Colonel Reuben Tucker's paratroopers about a kilometer up the road at 1915 hours. Within an hour, the Americans had eliminated the remaining anti-tank threat, and British engineers, more Shermans, 4 17-pounder anti-tank guns, and 2 companies of infantry reinforced the slender bridgehead. The vital Nijmegen Road Bridge was finally taken, 18 kilometers from the besieged British paratroopers at Arnhem. The Americans naturally expected the British armor to move rapidly to the rescue, but to the astonishment and fury of the airborne troops, nothing happened. Lieutenant Colonel Tucker was understandably furious. He is reported to have told a Guards major, "Your boys are hurting up there at Arnhem. You'd better go." The frustration was so intense that there is a report of an American commander threatening a British officer with his submachine gun in anger over the failure to advance, causing the officer to close the hatches on his Sherman. The next morning, Tucker expressed his bewilderment to General Gavin, asking, "What in the hell are they doing? We've been in this position for over 12 hours, and all they seem to be doing is brewing tea." Given the immense casualties his regiment had sustained securing the north bank, his anger was clearly justified. A British Guards officer later wrote that while American patrols wearing rubber-soled boots kept passing through, alert and eager to engage the enemy, they simply sat in their positions all night. He noted the desperate situation in Arnhem and the fact that the Guards' armored division did nothing. The facts confirm this observation. It would be 18 hours before the advance was resumed. For 5 hours, from 1900 hours until midnight, there was virtually nothing to stop an immediate advance up the Elst-Arnhem Road. Instead, British caution prevailed. Concerns about the vulnerability of the 30th Corps corridor south of Nijmegen seemed to overshadow the critical plight of the British paratroopers at Arnhem. Whether this was lethargy, military incompetence, or an unwillingness to accept further casualties for the greater strategic good remains a matter of historical debate. But the failure of Lieutenant General Horrocks to order the continued advance, hell for leather, that evening, or of Major General Adair to seize the initiative, led to tragic consequences north of the Waal. The consequence of this stagnation was immediate. By shortly after midnight on September 20th, a new defensive line began to build up approximately 4 kilometers north of the bridgehead. This line, initially manned by Battle Group Reinhold, was reinforced by dawn the next day with 16 Mark IV tanks, armored assault guns, and a Panzer Grenadier Battalion of the Frundensburg Division newly arrived from the Pannerden crossing.
In a testament to German leadership, SS Captain Karl-Heinz Uhling managed to lead the 60 or so survivors of his battle group to safety that night. Fighting until around 22-25 hours near the bridge, they slipped away, literally under the noses of the British, finding rowing boats to join their Frundensburg comrades on the north side of the river. Uhling was later awarded the Knight's Cross for his actions. The renewed battle for Hell's Highway. While the Nijmegen sector was defined by the controversial halt, the 101st Airborne Division continued its desperate fight to keep Hell's Highway open. General Taylor's worst fears were confirmed when Panzer Brigade 107 attacked the Somme Bridge again early on the 20th. Panther tanks soon controlled the bridge by fire, and the crossing would likely have fallen had it not been for 10 British tanks belatedly responding to an SOS dating from the crisis of the night before. The Germans withdrew after losing 4 Panthers to the British armor and anti-tank fire, unable to close on the village due to the canal.
General Taylor, realizing he could not maintain a static defense along the entire length of the highway, adopted a strategy of launching limited offensive thrusts to disrupt and unbalance the enemy. In one such operation, Lieutenant Colonel Kinnard's battalion of the 501st swept northwest from Veghel along the Willems Canal, resulting in the capture of approximately 500 Germans. On September 21st, 2 brigades of the long-awaited British 43rd Division arrived in Nijmegen. In light of the Arnhem crisis, one might expect them to immediately reinforce the advance north of the Wall. Instead, both remained in the city. This decision, however, proved beneficial for General Gavin, as the British assumed responsibility for Nijmegen, allowing the 82nd to focus its attention fully on securing its vulnerable eastern flank. Farther south, General Taylor continued his offensive tactic. 2 battalions of Lieutenant Colonel Johnson's 501st Regiment and 2 battalions of Lieutenant Colonel Michaelis's 502nd Regiment attempted to envelop German forces in the Schindel area. This operation started successfully after dark, but had to be abruptly called off the next afternoon due to a massive all-out German effort to cut Hell's Highway. The 101st had successfully defended the corridor with British tank support, but the slow progress of the British Corps on the flanks greatly prolonged their task. By the morning of the 22nd, when a major German attack was launched near Veghel, the British 8th Corps was still far southeast of Eindhoven, and the British 12th Corps was around Best, 8 kilometers west of Sanne. The American defenses were so thinly stretched that in some places the front consisted literally of the edges of the main Eindhoven-Nijmegen road, defended only by the 30th Corps troops moving along it. The failure of the flanking British Corps to keep pace and relieve the pressure on the Americans has been heavily scrutinized. The 12th Corps was not ready to advance on September 17th. 3 days later, it had covered only 15 kilometers. The 8th Corps began its advance only on the 20th and took 6 days to reach the Waal River. Crucially, the sources revealed General O'Connor, the commander of the 8th Corps, admitted long after the war that he had been instructed not to press too hard on his flank. The major German attack on Veghel began at 900 hours on September 22nd, launched from both sides of Hell's Highway. Battle Group Huber, consisting of 3 infantry battalions, artillery, anti-tank guns, and 4 Jagdpanthers, attacked from the west. The heaviest assault came from the east, mounted by Battle Group Walter, which included Panzer Brigade 107, a Frundsberg Panzer Grenadier Battalion, and Battle Group Heinke. General Taylor, forewarned by the Dutch resistance, deployed his meager reserves. Fortunately, members of the Dutch resistance had warned him of the German buildup, enabling him to deploy Lieutenant Colonel Ray Allen's Glider Infantry Battalion, 150 men of Colonel Sink's 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, and a battalion of British tanks. The German attacks were violent, and though not fully coordinated, succeeded in cutting the road between Uden and Veghel by 1330 hours. Panthers then moved south toward Veghel, and Battle Group Huber was able to bring fire to bear on the vital Willems Canal Bridge. The Americans responded by pulling back 2 battalions of the 501st from the Schindel area, who then engaged and virtually annihilated Battle Group Huber from the rear. Simultaneously, the arrival of a small reserve force heading for Uden, supported by British tanks and glider infantry, stabilized the situation by halting the German armored advance from the north.
By last light, the 101st held the Veghel area with 8 battalions of parachute and glider infantry and 2 companies of British tanks. However, this force was still deemed insufficient to guarantee Hell's Highway for the flow of 30th Corps units and supplies desperately needed north of Nijmegen. General Horrocks viewed the situation so seriously that he ordered a tank battalion and an infantry battalion from the Guards Armored Division in Nijmegen to immediately move south down the corridor to assist the Americans. Furthermore, British Second Army Commander General Miles Dempsey placed the 101st Airborne Division under the British 8th Corps and ordered the Corps commander to move a division to Veghel, highlighting the overall command concern regarding the corridor's safety. By the end of September 23, the 82nd Airborne Division had successfully expanded its Nijmegen defensive perimeter to a depth of 7 kilometers in the east and 12 kilometers in the southeast. Despite German reinforcements, the American paratroopers had fought them to a standstill, creating a critical and firm base for the subsequent advance of the British 8th Corps, and providing significantly increased protection for the vital Nijmegen bridges. With the belated but safe arrival of the 325th Glider Infantry Regiment that day, General Gavin could be rightly proud of his achievements, a performance made even more remarkable by the fact that he had been in constant pain from a suspected broken back since his initial landing. In the 101st Division sector, the situation remained volatile. German forces, including the balance of Battle Group Heinke and new parachute battalions, resumed their attack on the Veghel sector. In conjunction, the 6th German Parachute Regiment, commanded by Baron von der Heydte, was ordered to attack from the west. Both attacks were repulsed. By midday, the paratroopers attacking from the west were halted. General Walter, leading the assault from the east, chose to pull back, unable to ignore the steady advance of the British 8th Corps approaching his left rear. Within an hour, American forces with British tank support cleared the road linking up with British Guards units moving south from Uden. After 24 hours, Hell's Highway was opened again. German reports confirmed the heavy cost of the struggle, noting Panzer Brigade 107 lost 16 Panthers, 24 armored personnel carriers, and 300 men.
However, the respite was brief. Von der Heydte's 6th German Parachute Regiment attacked Veghel again. While heavy fighting ensued between the rival paratroopers, another German force, Battle Group Jungwirth, found an undefended section of the highway 6 kilometers southwest of Veghel and cut the road once more. Just 24 hours after its reopening, Hell's Highway was cut, forcing the Allies to recognize that much stronger forces would be required to reopen the vital road to Nijmegen permanently. On Monday morning, a combined American and British attack was launched to clear the highway. Despite being surrounded on 3 sides, the Germans held on, heavily mining the entire area before eventually withdrawing after dark. Allied engineers then spent until 1400 hours the following day clearing the mines before finally declaring Hell's Highway safe for regular use. From that point on, the Germans resorted to interdiction using artillery fire and aircraft. A major attack by 40 German aircraft took place against the Nijmegen Road Bridge on the 25th, but despite one bomb hitting the structure, the bridge remained passable. Strategic failure and the judgment of competence. The culmination of the Martin Garden operation saw the withdrawal of the surviving British and Polish troops from the Arnhem sector between late evening on the 25th and early morning on September 26th, carried out under heavy rain. Approximately 2,300 men reached safety. Operation Martin Garden concluded with a heavy price. The Allies suffered over 16,000 soldiers and 248 airmen lost. Of the nearly 12,000 British and Polish troops committed to Arnhem, 1,446 British and 97 Poles were killed, and thousands more became prisoners. The British 30th Corps suffered 1,480 casualties, while the 8th and 12th Corps lost 3,874 men between them. The American contribution involved 29,628 troops delivered by parachute or glider. The 82nd Airborne Division lost 215 killed, 719 wounded, and 427 missing, totaling 1,432 casualties. An additional 122 glider pilots were lost. While precise German casualty figures are unavailable, they are estimated to be approximately 6,400.
While the war was still ongoing, Allied leaders sought to present the outcome favorably. Winston Churchill declared it a decided victory, and Field Marshal Montgomery claimed it was 90% successful, arguing that 90% of the ground specified in the operation order had been taken. This assertion prompted Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands to offer the scathing reply, "My country can never again afford the luxury of a Montgomery success." In reality, Martin Garden was a strategic failure. The primary objectives were not met. The West Wall was not outflanked, the British Second Army was not positioned for an attack on the Ruhr's north flank, and the German 15th Army was not successfully cut off. The salient established led to nowhere and proved to be extremely costly in the ensuing months. An analysis of the command decisions suggests a stark division in military competence. The vast majority of troops, regardless of nationality, displayed immense bravery and earned the respect of their adversaries. However, in assessing the senior leadership, many found that the American and German ground commanders, specifically Generals Gavin and Taylor for the United States, and Field Marshal Model, General Bittrich, and the division commanders Harmel for Frundsberg and Harzer for Hohenstaufen for the Germans, demonstrated outstanding military competence. Conversely, the British commanders most directly involved, Field Marshal Montgomery, Generals Dempsey, Browning, Horrocks, Ader, Urquhart, commander of the 1st Parachute Division, and Thomas, commander of the 43rd Infantry Division, must bear the ultimate responsibility for the operation's failure. Controversy and revision. The source material itself contains strong dissenting opinions regarding the apportionment of blame and competence. Critics argue that the assessment favoring American and German command is partisan. One significant counter-argument states that General Gavin and General Taylor both failed to secure their most important objectives on day one. This specific failure, particularly the inability to seize the Nijmegen Bridge immediately, is cited as the sole reason the 1st Airborne Division was not relieved in time. The capture and security of the Nijmegen Road Bridge became a focal point of controversy. Critics argue that the British 30th Corps kept to its timeline, held up only by the delays caused by the blown bridge at Sun and the need to expend huge resources to capture and secure Nijmegen. Had the bridges been open upon the arrival of the 30th Corps, they might have been south of Arnhem on day 3 instead of day 6. Furthermore, the initial limited attempt by the 82nd Airborne Division to seize the Nijmegen Bridge on the 17th is heavily criticized. Despite being informed by their own intelligence groups and the Dutch underground at 6 in the evening that there were no serious German formations in the Reichswald, only 200 of the 5,352 landed on the 17th made a weak attempt to take the bridge. Critics argue that the task of smashing through the strong German bridge defenses was ultimately left chiefly to the Grenadier Guards and the 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment on the 20th. One account notes that the bridge was not taken by the 82nd, but by the Grenadier Guards, a claim supported by official post-battle 82nd Division reports.
The delay at Nijmegen on the 20th is also debated. While the film A Bridge Too Far suggests the delay was caused by the 30th Corps failing to bring up assault boats in time, sources suggest the boats were immediately available, but the delay was required for clearing the riverbank for the crossing and for the guards to fight their way through the town to cross in conjunction with the United States paratroopers. Post-war analysis indicates that Major General Gavin's account of events might have been motivated by self-preservation. After the war, an official United States enquiry found Gavin's account regarding the failure to take Nijmegen Bridge contained falsehoods. At the time, Gavin had praised General Browning, only beginning to criticize others after the war to save his own skin. The command failures extended to the political realm as well. The Polish commander, Major General Stanislaw Sosabowski, was dismissed on December 9th, undoubtedly due to pressure from Montgomery and Browning. This action took place within the broader political context where the Free Polish Army, aligned with the exiled government, was being systematically sidelined following the Yalta Agreement, as the Soviet Union refused to recognize them. Overall, the operation, while flawed in its planning, especially concerning the risks of weather, single lifts, and the massive American tasks, was perhaps doomed to failure partly because it was launched a week too late, allowing the Germans their window of superb reorganization. However, many still believe the operation came very close to succeeding, held back, crucially, by the failure to secure the Nijmegen Bridge quickly.
The enduring legacy and recognition. The aftermath of Operation Market Garden differed greatly depending on the nationality of the soldier. The British survivors from Arnhem are flown back to England on September 30th and welcomed as national heroes. In a surprisingly generous decision by General Eisenhower and the American authorities, the 2 United States Airborne Divisions were kept under Field Marshal Montgomery's command and remained in the line in Holland for an additional 6 weeks. During this extended period, they suffered substantial further losses, 3,594 casualties, including 685 killed. Today, awareness among the British public regarding the extensive contribution and sacrifice made by the Americans in the operation is low. Despite the debates and historical controversies, the quality of the American paratroopers left a lasting impression on their British counterparts. General Horrocks, commander of the 30th Corps, was unequivocal in his post-war assessment, writing, "As this difficult battle progressed, I became more and more impressed with the fighting qualities of the 82nd and 101st United States Airborne Divisions." Horrocks specifically praised their quickness into action. He also offered a profound description of their leaders, Major General Maxwell Taylor and Brigadier General James Gavin, noting they were quiet, sensitive-looking men of great charm, possessing an almost British passion for understatement, completely unlike the popular cartoon conception of the loud-voiced, boastful cigar-chewing American. He concluded that beneath their deceptively gentle exterior, both Taylor and Gavin were very tough characters indeed, commanding troops who were some of the toughest troops I have ever come across in my life. For the Dutch population, the consequences were the most painful. Around 100,000 people were forced out of the Arnhem area. Their homes were destroyed and systematically looted by the retreating Germans, who then drastically cut their rations to less than 500 calories a day, leading to the suffering known as the Hunger Winter. In retaliation for Dutch assistance to the Allies and a countrywide railway strike initiated on September 17th, the Germans halted all inland shipping. Without trains or barges, moving sufficient food from the agricultural east to the cities and towns in the west became impossible. It is estimated that approximately 25,000 Dutch citizens died of starvation that winter. As they perished, they wondered why the Allies did not continue their advance to free them. The harsh reality was that the German forces were too strong, the ground too challenging, and any major advance risked a level of destruction that could have resulted in the flooding of most of the Netherlands. Consequently, the Allies redirected their focus toward the Rhine River. The legacy of Operation Market Garden is therefore multi-layered, defined by ambition, planning failures, incredible German resilience, and critically, the extraordinary fighting spirit and competence of the American airborne soldiers who secured the vast corridor. Final reflections on valor and historical omission.
The story of Operation Market Garden serves as a powerful reminder that history often favors the high drama of defeat over the grinding, essential achievements that secured a fragile victory. The immense and demanding missions assigned to the United States 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions spanned a complex web of objectives, securing major river crossings, holding vital high ground against counterattacks from the Reichswald, and maintaining control over the single, narrow, 100-kilometer supply route. While historians continue to debate the failures of command at the highest levels, particularly the strategic caution that allowed the critical 18-hour delay north of Nijmegen, the tactical performance of the American airborne units remains undeniable. The 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment's assault crossing of the Waal River stands as one of the most gallant and desperate actions of the war, executed under conditions that promised annihilation, yet successfully securing the bridgehead that was supposed to lead to salvation for Arnhem. Their efforts, along with the tenacious defense of Hell's Highway by the 101st Airborne Division against repeated, powerful German armored counterattacks involving the elite Panzer Brigade 107, were instrumental in ensuring that the British ground forces advanced as far as they did. The American ability to transition immediately from airborne drop to offensive action, coupled with the organizational skill of their commanders, proved highly effective against the highly competent, improvised German defenses. The ultimate failure of the operation to achieve its strategic goal to outflank the West Wall and seize the Ruhr was not due to a lack of effort or courage by the troops on the ground, but rather a combination of flawed planning, weather, lift capacity, extensive American mission requirements, and the paralyzing strategic hesitation exhibited by certain Allied senior commanders at critical moments. The true cost of Market Garden was measured not only in Allied casualties, but also in the terrible price paid by the Dutch population during the subsequent Hunger Winter. By staying in the line for 6 additional weeks after the main operation concluded, the American airborne divisions continued to sustain heavy casualties, consolidating the gains and providing a firm base for future operations.
Their bravery and sacrifices, however often overshadowed by the tragedy of Arnhem, remain a profound and essential element of the history of the Western Front. The two American divisions did indeed fight their hearts out, and their competence, often contrasted favorably with that of their adversaries, deserves enduring recognition.